This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. On today's podcast clip, we have Professor Rachel Kennedy from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, University of South Australia.
Andrew had already secured the data and had an analyst working with him, but I took over kind of doing the number crunching and writing it up, and we bonded over that project. And we were lucky enough, that was award-winning research. And then we moved on to the brand advertising as creative publicity paper and a number of other things. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it was bonding overnight, but we learnt to have a really good working relationship, loved working with him.
Yeah.
And he took me to New York for the first time and introduced me to some of his contacts, which has been amazing because then over time, many of those supporters who had stood by Andrew for a long time have now become core institute supporters, these decades later. So it ended up being very much win-win for Andrew and the team at South Bank and all of the young researchers that became, the institute, because there was beautiful synergy of being able to stand on their shoulders because they'd done so much in marketing and had such a strength of applying science to this discipline, and yet we had an enthusiasm to go out and share that and to continue the work in different ways.
Yeah. I know quite a bit about Andrew's work. I've probably read dozens of his articles and multiple times and quite embraced on it. But unfortunately, Andrew had passed away before I joined the Institute, so I never had an opportunity to meet him. How would you describe him as a person? We all respect him for what he's done as work, but what was he like as a human being?
I really liked him. It definitely had a sense of humour, but you definitely could see his Germanic roots.
Okay.
And so he could be quite blunt and strong with some things, but I liked that. You knew where you stood. Probably wouldn't want to be on his wrong side, but there was a passion there. So if someone did, critique work, he would spend hours and days or weeks, whatever was relevant, writing a response. And an amazing brain.
Yeah, that's what I've heard about him as well, from other people, like informally, it was a strong-willed person and, really... Yeah, his intelligence was something that shone through his personal life as well.
Yeah, and an incredible passion to his work. I've never seen anybody else who would go through a manuscript so many times. Wow. Every word mattered. So English was his second language, but he was so particular about what word best described the data and best would communicate to others long term.
Yeah. That's actually a wonderful quality to have, especially because manuscripts are huge. Short manuscripts in marketing are, 4,000 to 6,000 words. The bigger ones are 12,000 words. And to sit there and literally scrutinise each word and then every sentence. I think the only person I've heard is like that is Keston Green, actually. I heard every single word, him and Scott Armstrong are very detailed and, because they don't want their work to be misinterpreted.
Completely. And the other thing about this is he was a statistician, so numbers were really his thing, but likewise he would spend enormous amount of times of thinking, how do you present data?
Yeah.
And that's where his principles of making sure things are sorted by market share so that you can see patterns that matter to brands, including totals or averages, were very much, rules to him that should be the norm, and he wanted others to know about those so that we were all better communicators and get the most out of the data that we've got.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that the empirical things that he's found and the patterns in the data that he's found have changed the way we think about marketing. But I actually kind of feel like some of the stuff that's had a real impact that does go, unrecognised is the principles of data reduction. They are so huge because without applying them, things like removing unnecessary lines and the big one, which is ordering by size, if you don't do that, you just can't see the patterns.
And even things like rounding.
Yeah, rounding's a huge one as well.
Especially when people often, don't account for sampling error and then they make tables complex so you can't see the patterns. Yeah, very sensible rules.
And you see it in industry and academic conferences. You're sitting there and you're in a presentation, maybe the speaker has 15 minutes and they talk about previous studies and then they get along to their results. And you're sitting there and the way that they've presented this data, you can't possibly, within the 2 minutes of time that they give you to look at that slide, interpret what's going on. Because there's 3 or 4 decimal places. A lot of the time they're inconsistent and they're ordered in a funny way, or it's all grid line patterns. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to get across here. And so I try to listen into what they're saying, but I often... At a DC, actually, I spoke to a girl afterwards. I said, you should really read Andrew's work about principles of data reduction. It would very much help you. And then, funnily enough, I heard Robert East tell her the same thing after the presentation. So that thing, I think, has had a lot of impact.
I think it applies to industry equally. So a common thing is people get their tracking studies or whatever research report it might be, and their brand appears at the top of any reporting. And absolutely, they want to know where they stand.
Makes sense to them, yeah.
Well, it kind of in theory might, but then they don't realise that they're underperforming for their size because they're not sorted by size.
Yeah, it'd work if you had the brand that was the largest.
Absolutely.
Everything else, but I suppose
that's the minority of businesses, though, if we look at it statistically.
If you think from their perspective, though, and you don't realise that ordering by size is so important, that your perspective is my brand is the most important. So we'll make it easy for everyone else in the room, like our shareholders or other people in our team, maybe the finance team. We'll put ours at the top so then they can quickly find us. But like you said, it can lead to misinterpretation of the results.
But you can still do both. So you sort by share, but bold the brand of interest.
Yeah, I've done that for reports actually as well, in terms of just flagging the brand for who we're doing the report for, to be you guys are, 7th highest market share, but I'll put maybe their logo next to it or something. So then it is easy to find their brand for them, but they realise that they're not. Yeah. So
there's room to grow.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the paper that I knew you most for, especially entering into the Institute as an honours student, was the paper you mentioned just then, which was the branches of profiles seldom differ. I didn't realise that came out of your work with Andrew. I know he's one of the co-authors there. And so he already had all the data. So it was
his idea.
Okay.
And he'd already worked out what the analysis might look like, because that was also building on other work that he'd done previously with Kathy Hammond and some others. Yeah. Yes. So that was my core project when I got to London, bringing that to life. And a key point was presenting it at the Market Research Society and, then getting it published. So
yeah, I think it's, I quite like the paper. I've read it so many times and since I've replicated it with you, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I remember actually when Robert East and Kathy Hammond were visiting the Institute. Now, this must have been, we were still in draft stage of that paper at this point, so it must have been 4 or 5 years ago now. And I was sitting with Kathy in the lunchroom, and she has no idea who I am. I was just a master's student at the time, I think, and here I am telling her, I really liked her paper from 1996, and she's just looking at me like that.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY for my take on the marketing issues of the day.